Today's reading is by the late Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Elizabeth Tarbox. When the day is too bright or the night too dark, and your feelings are like an avalanche barreling down the mountain of events outside your control, when you look down and you are falling and you cannot see the bottom, or when your pain has eaten you and you're nothing but a hungry, empty hole, then there is an opportunity for giving. Don't stay home and cover your head with a pillow. Go outside and plant a tulip bulb in the ground. That is an act of rebirth. Sprinkle breadcrumbs for the squirrels or sunflower seeds for the birds. That is a claiming of life. And when you have done that, or if you cannot do that, go stare at a tree whose leaves are letting go for its very survival. Pick up a leaf, stare at it. It is life. It has something to teach you. You are as precious as the birds or the tulips or the tree whose crenellated bark protects the insects who seek its shelter. You are an amazing, complex being with poetry in your arteries and charity layered beneath your skin. You have before you a day full of opportunities for living and giving. Do not think you know all there is to know about yourself, for you have not given enough away yet to be able to claim self-knowledge. Do you have work to do today? Then do it as if your life were hanging in the balance. Do it as fiercely as if it mattered, for it does. Do you think the world doesn't need you? Think again. You cleanse the world with your breathing. You beautify the world with your thinking and acting and caring. Don't stay home and suffocate on your sorrow. Go outside and give yourself to the world's asking. Here ends the reading.
There are some things I did not choose. People have done things I cannot undo. But I can grow to accept them. Learn how to be at peace with them and to focus upon what I can change. I can change. I can change. I can change. I can change.
A little boy stands on the beach where hundreds of starfish have been swept up by the waves and stranded there to die. He's throwing the starfish back in the water one by one so they can survive. A grown-up watches him for a minute from up on the boardwalk and then yells down, "You can't possibly throw all of those starfish back in the water. You could stand there all night throwing starfish. It won't matter." The boy looks around, throws another starfish in the water, and says, "It matters to this one." Despair is the response of an alive and reverent human to real conditions in our world. Despair can be personal for my life, for my family, for my body. Despair can be connected to personal depression, my sense of meaningless or futility, my brain chemistry. Despair can also be prophetic, a collective response to things that are wrong, to workings of evil, to injustice, to destruction. Our despair, our sense of the world or the community as being broken, shared exhaustion, lamentation, the experience together of just being totally defeated. Despair can be a justifiable response to what we see happening around the planet. Climate change, the rising seas. My God, how timely is that? When I prepared this sermon, it was pre-Hurricane Helene, but there are always other things going on. Friday night, I was up till 2 a.m. experiencing shock and, despair at seeing the hurricane's destruction even as far inland as Atlanta. 800 miles from what do they call it? Seafall, is it? Landfall? Landfall. Asheville, North Carolina, it's in the mountains. Completely devastated. Insurance companies call such natural disasters an act of God. Okay, all right, but what about what humans are going to do? What infrastructures and priorities and plans exist to support life and survival on our planet? The child on the beach throwing back the starfish story is enduring because it reminds us of those dogged ways that we can actually and genuinely help and heal one at a time by paying attention to what's right in front of us. My inspiration for this sermon series that we've been doing through most of September is that quote by Mother Teresa, which is, we can't always do big things, but we can do small things with great love. In her wonderful book, A Paradise Built in Hell, The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster, Rebecca Solnit calls this the paradise of rising to the occasion. It's a wonderful book, by the way. I just pulled it out again a couple days ago. People like you and me, we often wish we could or could have done with our lives big things, great things, had an impressive impact. What I've noticed, though, is that while many people individually and as members of organizations want to accomplish great things, those same people will walk right by 1,000 opportunities a day to throw a starfish back into the sea. They will walk right past each other, me too, I'm also guilty of this, and not see what's right in front of them as a way to save and encourage life and work against despair, because they feel enlisted in a great cause in conceptual ways, but don't see how their small actions can serve and do serve that great cause. And as the days pass and the great cause isn't necessarily manifesting the big revolution that we're hoping for, our frustration and our sense of futility and despair can mount. Where is the movement leading? Why isn't it succeeding? Meanwhile, someone across the street is suffering, hungry, disenfranchised, feeling excluded from society, from community, from love, in need of someone just to listen, or maybe someone to mow their lawn. But to cross that street and to make that effort, it just seems a little irritating. It seems maybe sometimes a little beneath us. We are the adults on the beach telling the child, it won't matter. The most powerful spiritual practice to shore up our hearts, souls, and selves against despair is to throw one starfish at a time back into the sea, because it matters to that one. And also, and this is so important, because it's an act and not just a concept. I know of a widow, and I actually didn't know this person. This was told to me when I was a minister in another congregation. This woman was greatly debilitated by grief and despair. She was of very advanced years, and she didn't have the reserves of energy that fueled her decades of previous involvement, activity, and all of those things that helped her stave off feelings of despair about the state of the world. She was always very involved in big causes and very active in all of that. Well, after a season or two of barely leaving the house, she came to terms with the fact that she was going to be alive for the foreseeable future, and that she was therefore going to have to find something to do with her time, even in such condition as she was, which for her felt very fragile. And as we said in the meditation a few minutes ago, to hold ourselves where we are and as we are is such a beginning of compassion. We can't have compassion that goes outward into the world if it doesn't start here, to look at ourselves even when we're feeling defeated and broken and useless and saying, well, you know what remains here is still me. I'm alive, such as I am. How can I accompany my sad self through this? No one is very likely to come through the door and find a meaning or purpose for me. That does sometimes happen, but it often is up to us. And so she had to say, how can I find that? And so what she determined that she's going to do is to bake a cake every day. This would be her morning spiritual practice. A spiritual practice as well as a baking one, because she didn't know when she took out the flour and the eggs and the sugar and the butter and the bowls, she didn't know where this cake was going to be going, to whom and for whom she would be making a gift of sweetness. So as she prepared ingredients, and eventually it became a store-bought cake mix, and as the aroma filled the house, and those ingredients became a solid thing, a cake, she would allow her attention to wander out over her immediate community. I do this very frequently. I just call it praying my spirit out over the community. You just kind of send yourself out like a little antenna. And this is a form of prayer, and her prayer was, who needs a cake today? Asking this question moved her attention from herself to others, to really entering their lives, which is the most important moral transformation any of us can make. It's called empathy. What is that other person's life like? Let me really try to enter into that. This question of who needs a cake shifted her thoughts from the world and about the world from critique and distance to the world as an environment she was part of and could influence. Who needs a cake today? The CPA in town that she had on her mind, because, she got to get her taxes done, suddenly became not just someone who was going to be a service provider to her, a paid employee, but was suddenly someone she became aware of as a hardworking human being in early April of tax season, who was very likely overwhelmed, missing family, staying late at the office. So she shifted into that mode of empathy. The person that she saw very occasionally, who she knew, casually through community, not, sacred gossip, had a hip replacement, suddenly wasn't someone who just came idly to mind, but became a real human being to her. Just maybe a mile away, but this person might be in pain. This person might be very isolated, and their day might be truly elevated by a little brief visit and a cake. It's a really radical act to begin to see the world this way. When I went down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, immediately after Hurricane Katrina, I went to cover some ministerial duties for my colleague, Steve Crump, whose congregation had been completely overwhelmed by the refugees from New Orleans that you might recall converged upon Baton Rouge as they were escaping the hurricane. And I hoped to be of really big and real help. What I wound up doing was leading some worship services so that Steve could rest because he was flat out completely exhausted. And I also drove around a lot of boxes of donations from one place to another. It turned out that what was most helpful for me to do was mostly keep my mouth shut, obey orders, and in a crisis like that, let me tell you, no one's really doing niceties. There's not a lot of please and thank you, and gee, I really appreciate you going on. In fact, I don't remember any. It's like, hey, you're a body. Get these to Bethel Church, try to be back by 3 p.m., and you're just doing this, and you're lifting and you're bringing. And you go to Bethel Church, you don't know where you're going. You put the address into a GPS, and you're just like, okay, I'm here. You get out of the car, and people are living in the sanctuary, and people are living with a sheet and the clothes that they escaped with. That's it. It's complete chaos, and you obediently keep your mouth shut. You unload boxes. You keep your ideas about how it could be done better to yourself, and you go load up some more boxes. You keep throwing starfish back into the sea. It's very common when we feel despair to look to expert opinions, to look for people with letters after their names on television shows, or we get the books, who invite us into a process of intellectualizing despair and what we are feeling and experiencing. Those experts can be great if what we want to do is diagnose problems, develop opinions about them, and go forth with big opinions on how to improve or fix things. It's all up here. The problem in this approach is that it's not a spiritual approach, and despair is a spiritual experience. Yesterday, as I was following coverage on the total obliteration of the Arts District in Asheville, North Carolina, I saw among the lamentations that people had made as comments this lone, perky comment: they'll rebuild. Okay, all right, is this the time to say that, though? I mean, I immediately kind of went, that's interesting. They'll rebuild, and that might be, and I certainly hope it is. They have actually money in that part of the state to do that. It's a big tourist area. A lot of parts of the states won't, however. As Ecclesiastes said, there's a time to every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be hopeful and optimistic, and there is a time to lament and to despair. If we are to respect the reality of our human predicament and to develop our capacity to be helpers and healers, there are times when it is the most right and good thing to simply hold hands, to show up, to behold the truth of how hard it is together, to sing that song of lamentation, to witness what is lost, and to recognize that despair is born of love. And then, grounded in that love, we may return to the beach, the shared beach that is our lives, and begin to return the stranded starfish to the sea, one at a time.